Hey Flatirons, thanks for joining us. Glad you're here. We're in the middle of our series called Echo. It's all about worship and living this with God lifestyle the other 6 days of the week, as well as when we're together on the weekend. So if you want to check out the rest of the messages, look at flatironschurch.com/messages. So glad you're here.
Good morning, Flatirons. So glad you guys are here. Let's stand up together, sing this out this morning.
Silence. fall to the depths, but you gave your life for mine, your life for mine.
So we're going to sing this new song together here this morning. And no matter where you're at, when you walk in this place this morning, if you're in the highest of highs, or if you're in the lowest of lows, we are deeply loved by a God who loved us so much that he sent his son Jesus for us. So as we sing this song is about praise. We're going to remember the reasons that God is worthy of our praise. He is good. And we're going to sing about that this morning. We've come to join the song sung long before our lives, to raise our voice along heaven and earth alike. Highest praises, Lord of all. You sing highest and highest praises, Lord of all. Highest praises, you are worthy, Lord of all. Be enthroned upon the praises of 1,000 generations. You are worthy, Lord of all. To you the slain risen King, we lift our voice with heaven singing, worthy, Lord of Good morning, Flatterers. We're so glad you guys are here this morning. Go ahead and take a moment, say hello to somebody next to you, and you can take a seat.
Hey Flatterers, good morning. How's it going? You guys feel good? Should feel good. I walked outside in between services, huge mistake. I lost 3 pounds though, it's nice. Today's forecast is 300 degrees, so I'm glad you're here. I had them turn it down just 1 degree, so if you get cold, you are welcome, okay? So anyways, I'm glad you found your way here today. We have some really cool stuff planned. Today's the 3rd week of this series called Echo, but real fast before that, somebody asked me last night, they said, I'm just waiting, are you gonna make fun of soccer during the World Cup? Because you make fun of soccer all the time. I go, I did it once, guys. I made fun of soccer one time. It was fun, I enjoyed it. But there's like 5 of you who really love soccer and you're so mad at me still. So can I just say, I'm sorry, soccer's fine. I'm gonna cheer for Croatia because that's the funnest name to say. Yeah, you like that one? How about England? Does anybody like England? I'm cheering for the Quidditch team of England, so I'm excited for that. I love, the World Cup is fine. I'm not gonna make fun of it. If you like soccer, can we be friends? Is that cool? Can we do it? Okay. Awesome. Hey, so this is the 3rd week of Echo. If you missed the first couple weeks, they're all online at flatironschurch.com. Last week, Tommy played a Nirvana song. It was awesome. It's on there too, so you go check that out. It was a really good week. So if you missed that, please see about that. But here locally in Lafayette, I have 2 things for us before Ben jumps up here for the 3rd week of this series. The first one is this. Maybe you're new, or maybe you've always just kind of wondered, how can I find a place where I can fit in this big church and make it a little smaller? And we talk about serving a lot. So if you don't know, like maybe that's just like a weird word, or you're not really sure what I mean by that. Here's what I mean by that. We have teams like facilities that do all the prep for this building. They do all the cleanup afterwards. They're an amazing team. We have greeters and ushers and a parking team, which is a really horrible job this time of year. So if that's something that we go, I would love to help them make that happen. You can get info on that over at our booth or in the lobby anytime. Grab a card and find out what that's all about. But I have one real specific opportunity for you that I want to talk about today, which is next Saturday at 6 o'clock during the service. Our kids team is going to do a training right over here in the Flatirons Academy space. And so if you're wondering what that looks like, because I think it's a kind of a scary thing, I got a couple different scenarios for you, because I love what they do every week. So I go back there, as soon as I walk off the stage, I go back and check in on them. And I miss my kids being the age where they couldn't talk back to me. Does anybody else feel that way? I really do miss it. So I'll go in there and I'll make those kids cry, and then the baby whisperers take over and make sure that they're okay. So if you're a baby whisperer, they have spaces on those teams that they really could use your skill set. And then if you're like me too, I am a great 10-year-old basketball player. It took me till I was 40 to get there, but I'm great at it. So I go in there and I'm just blocking shots to Kimby Mutombo all day. Super fun. So if you're the kind of guy or gal that likes to play basketball with little kids and just dominate Billy Madison style, they have a team for you too. But here's the thing that's true about both of those scenarios, both those extremes. Every single week, they're doing significant ministry with kids. So from birth all the way through 5th grade, they're talking about who Jesus is. They're sharing Bible stories. Those kids are getting an amazing foundation from a team that I think is the best in the world. So if that's interesting to you on any level, next Saturday at 6 o'clock, that training is over there in that space. We'd love to see you out there for that. Okay, cool. Second thing is this. If you've been around before, or maybe you're brand new and you never heard this, so I want to share with you an opportunity called the Backpack Drive. We do this every year. And it serves as kind of an intersection of a bunch of our partners. So we have a partner called Sister Carmen Community Center right over here on the other side of town. They do incredible work. If you ever want to go on to sistercarmen.org and see what they're about, I'm super proud to be affiliated with them and who they are. We have another partner called Crayons to Calculators who do this backpack drive and collect these supplies. And also we have a partner over here on this side of town called Sanchez Elementary, and their staff is incredible. I love that they are reaching into that community and the families that come to their school and doing just, guys, work that I can't believe is real. So those are our partners. They intersected this thing called the Backpack Drive. And here's what we do. We grab brand new backpacks. We fill them with this list of supplies that you can grab in the lobby on your way out. And we bring those backpacks next weekend, and we collect a couple thousand of them every year. And here's what they're for. They're to send kids back to school with dignity. So kids who maybe can't afford to have that brand new backpack and all those supplies, and they show up empty-handed to school. Sister Carmen and Crayons to Calculators hands those backpacks out all over the county, all over the area. I had a woman approach me last night who told me she worked at a school over in Superior for 21 years and that they handed out hundreds of backpacks to those kids every year. So all these communities right around us, super, super supported by the fact that we bring this stuff every year. So if that tugs on your heartstrings, or if you want to ask me more questions about it out there in the lobby, it's something that's super important to me. As you think about kids who are showing up, maybe a brand new school, maybe the first time ever having to do this, and they see what everybody else has, and they don't have an opportunity like that, this gets that for them. So Backpack Drive next weekend. I would love to have your family join us in this. Sound good? All right. Hey, Ben's going to jump up here for week 3 of Echo. I'm going to pray for us. I'm so glad you're here. God, I pray as we walk in here today, God, and I know we all come from a different week and different circumstances, God. Some of us had the best week ever, and some of us had the worst week where things are literally unbelievable. But God, I know for me and for some of the families that I love in this room that this has been a hard week. God, there's been tragedy, there's been death, there's been things knocking at our doors that just feel like it's insurmountable. So God, I pray as we give you this hour today, God, as we talk about how good you are because of Jesus, as we talk about what it really looks like to have our lives changed, guys, we talk about what it really looks like to be in the battle of the everyday when we don't really know what you're up to or why life looks the way it does, but we have this idea somewhere in our mind and heart that you are good. God, I pray that we'd allow you to speak in that this morning, that we allow you to have that space, and that we'd allow you to move in it. And we love you, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, hi. Oh, hi. What's up? Hey, so one of my favorite things about Flatirons is we don't just do food drives, we don't just do backpack drives, we go all out, right? Like we always try to get the very best food and the very best backpacks. And so here's what you're gonna do, all right? If you are a 90s kid like I am, then you're gonna go ahead and get yourself a Trapper Keeper and throw it in that bad boy, right? Because all of us wanted Trapper Keepers back in the 90s. And if you were like me, you never got one, right? You always got like whatever 70-cent, folder my parents could afford from Walmart. And you pretended like it was a Trapper Keeper, which is possible. I'll teach you how to do it later. Not important for today, though. Hi. Hey, so let me jump right back into this today. In case you missed a few, need reminded, whatever, we're in the middle of this series called Echo. All right, and Echo is all about worship, and specifically, it's all about worship like we typically think of it, which is the thing where we get together in rooms like this and we stand up and we sing songs together, right? Worship in the general sense is much bigger than this. It's not just narrowed to singing songs, but for the course of this series, we're kind of zooming in on the singing songs version of worship. Why do we do that? Right? I explained a couple weeks ago that I had multiple people come to me in the lobby and say something like, hey, the worship thing that we do, isn't that kind of outdated? Should we just go ahead and get rid of that? And I realized I didn't have a good answer for them. Right? And so I've been on a personal quest to figure out this whole singing songs version of worship. Is that important? And if so, why? And then as we're figuring out this worship thing together, we're also doing this. We're taking songs that we sing in here all the time, and we're breaking them down verse by verse, lyric by lyric, to figure out what are we singing to and about God. Or in other words, why is God deserving of our worship? All right, and this is what we're doing in the Echo series. Those two things. What is worship and why is it important? And then who is God and why is he deserving of our worship? And this week, I want to talk about another thing that happens when we worship that is part of our conversational back and forth relationship with God, which we've been talking about for months in here. All right, and it's this. When we remember who God is, we're reminded of who we are. All right, or in other words, when we echo God's identity back to him through worship, he echoes back to us and he reminds us of our own identity. Right? And to explain that, I'm going to break down a song we sing all the time in here, a song called Who You Say I Am. All right, so let's get started. So this song, Who You Say I Am, it's all about our identity, like who am I? That's what the whole song is about. If you're really familiar with it, maybe you're not familiar with it, maybe you never even noticed, but the very first line of this song is actually a question about identity, and the rest of the song is the answer to the question. And the question goes like this, first line of the song, who am I? Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? And the rest of the song is trying to answer that question. And that question is a great question. All right? It's actually a timeless question, right? Like you and I have asked this about ourselves, and people will ask this about themselves until the end of history, because at the end of the day, the question is really just, who am I? Who am I? That's a really philosophical question. Right? Who am I? People have spent entire lifetimes pondering this question. Right? It's usually philosophers like Descartes, or it's the kind of people who frequent Grateful Dead concerts and watch Cheech and Chong movies, you know? Like, who am I, man? Like, really, who am I? And I've had that phase in my life, so there's like no judgment. I understand it. But even us, like most of us who don't even think that we think about this a lot, we are subconsciously, all the time we're asking this question, who am I? All right, who am I as a parent? Who am I as a kid, as a student, a leader? Who am I as an employee, a boss? Fill in the blank. Right? What makes me different and unique? And how should I act and behave? And where do I find my value? What will I fight for? What makes me me? Who am I? We're asking that question all the time. And this Who You Say I Am song is setting out to answer that age-old question. And specifically, to go back to the first line, the song answers the question of, who am I that the highest king would welcome me? Or in other words, what is it about me that God, the highest king, would take notice of me and see my mess? And then like we talked about last weekend, welcome my mess into his presence. Why would he do that? Who am I to deserve that? And this song is drawing attention to a very genuine problem that needs solved. All right, and the problem is this. So regardless of what you believe, all right, maybe you're not sure what you believe about this whole God, Jesus stuff, and you're in here checking it out. If that's you, welcome. And also, if that's you, go with me on a theoretical basis right now. All right, here's the problem. It's this. If God is real, then also logically, he's the king of everything. If God is real, he's the king of everything. Here's what I mean by that. If God really did create us, all right, then we belong to him. Right? Just in the same way, if you were to make something, you make like a pot or something, you get to decide what you want to do with it. Right? You can break it, you can give it to a friend, you can paint it. It's yours. It belongs to you because you made it. And if God really did create us, then we belong to him. And if God really did create the earth and everything in it, then this place, everything we can see, has to be his dominion. All right? His kingdom. And then if God really is that powerful of a king, then technically everyone and everything should have to swear allegiance to him, submit to his authority, because we are his and we're living in his kingdom. But then the biggest part of this problem is this. If God really is a perfect king, then how can he be involved in our imperfect lives? Like, how can he do that without ruining his own perfection? What is it about us that the highest king, the most powerful, perfect being in existence, would welcome our mess into his presence? And he welcomes it. Right? He doesn't just put up with us like we do with our weird cousins at Thanksgiving dinner and stuff like that, right? He welcomes us. He wants us to be close to him. Who are we that God would welcome us? That's our question. And the answer is found in the chorus of this song, which starts like this. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. All right, who the Son sets free is free indeed. Right away, let's hit pause and talk about that, because what does that mean? All right, it means this. If you've put your faith in Jesus, which means you believe he is who he says he is and he'll keep all of his promises, that's what faith is. If you put your faith in Jesus, then starting at that moment and immediately, he has set you free. And you're actually technically free indeed, which means you're definitely totally free. Whoever wrote this song, they kind of cheated because that line from the song is ripped just straight from the Bible in John chapter 8. It's plagiarism. I told Jesus. I think he's okay with it. But in John 8, Jesus is talking to a group of people that already believe in him. And he says this. Maybe you remember this verse from last weekend. He says, if you hold to my teaching, then you're really my disciples. And then you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. All right, and like we talked about last week, it's Jesus' word. All right, like his actual literal words that he spoke to us, his teaching, his truth, that when applied to our lives, sets us free, brings dead things back to life. But the question is this. Jesus' truth sets us free from what? What does it set us free from? And the group that Jesus is talking with, they're confused about the same thing. And so they ask him that. They basically say this. They go, hey, Jesus, we're not slaves anymore like we used to be. I mean, Rome occupies our city, but they haven't enslaved us. And so what do we need set free from? And here's how Jesus clears it up for them. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. What does that mean? Well, Jesus is basically saying this. He goes, listen, I'm not talking about literal slavery. I'm talking about spiritual slavery. Right? I'm talking about the state of being trapped in your own sinfulness, your own brokenness, your own mess. You're just trapped in it and you can't get out. And let's be honest, for most of us in this room, myself included, we know exactly what that's like. Right? We know what it's like to feel helpless in the midst of our lifelong habits and addictions and mess. Right? We know what it's like to be trapped there. Some of us are there right now, and we view ourselves as ticking time bombs, right? It's only a matter of time until I explode and blow up my family again. We've been there. And really, whenever we feel like that, it becomes an identity issue. Right? So whenever we're trapped in our own sinfulness, we're enslaved to our mess, we then become enslaved to really bad definitions of who we are. I mean this, we start thinking things like this. We think it's only a matter of time until I blow up my marriage because that's just who I am. I'm a liar and I'm a cheat, right? That's who my dad was and I followed in his footsteps. I can't help it. It's who I am. It becomes an identity issue, right? And fill in the blank, take marriage and fill in the blank with whatever it is you're walking through and you get it. We can all very easily become slaves to these terrible, sinful, awful definitions of who we are and how it's like us to act and what we're not only capable of, but what we've convinced ourselves we're confined to, right? I eventually will have another affair. I eventually will take another drink. I eventually will crawl back to all the gossip and divisiveness because, catch it, that's just who I am. And Jesus is good and he's always honest with us. And so he tells us that we all have this tendency to become enslaved to our own mess. But thankfully, he doesn't leave us hanging there, right, in this identity crisis. Instead, he follows it by saying this. He says, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family. So a slave doesn't belong to the family that a slave works for, but a son belongs to it forever. And so if the son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. That's the line from that song. What does all that mean? Well, Jesus sticks to his metaphor and he basically says this. He goes, it's kind of like the problem of actual literal slavery, which Jesus hated. He goes, it's kind of like that, where like a slave cannot walk into the master's house at random and say, I'd like to be free now. That's not how it works. Instead, the only person who can hand a slave his freedom is either the master himself or the master's son, the son working on his father's behalf, the son doing business in his father's name. And so Jesus says, I'm God's son, all right? And I'm here in his name and on his behalf. And so when it comes to your own sinfulness and all the mess that you're trapped in, when you put your faith in me, I walk into the Father's house and I point at you and I say, he's a free man now. And from that point on, you are free indeed. You're definitely, totally free, and God doesn't hold your mess against you anymore. All right, so Jesus' truth sets us free. What does it set us free from? It sets us free from the judgment and condemnation and isolation that comes with being imperfect people who live within the kingdom of a perfect God. And when we're set free from that, we're also set free from all the false identities that came with being slaves. We're set free from thinking that all we'll ever earn is just more judgment and more condemnation and more punishment because that's just who we are. Now, we could definitely park there for the rest of the day, all right, and spend the rest of our time talking about what we've been set free from. But I wonder if you've ever noticed something. All right? I wonder if you've ever noticed how much time and energy Christians spend talking about what they've been set free from or what we're trying to get set free from. And I wonder if you've ever noticed how little time and energy we spend talking about what we've been set free for. And this is especially true of worship songs. Right? Typically, a worship song is all about the mess we used to be, but Jesus paid for it. And we are thankful for that. Without the cross, everything we do in here is a totally moot point. But my question is this: now that we're free, what is different about us? What is now possible for us? What has changed about us? And why don't we talk about that more often? Paul in the Bible, he says the same thing. He says it like this. He says, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. So Jesus set us free so that we could live in freedom today. He goes, so stand firm then and don't let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Or in other words, Jesus paid a great price. He laid down his life so that we could be a free people who actively live within our current freedom. Not so that we could be a technically free people who keep living and acting within the slavery of our past. I mean, sometimes I wonder if Jesus were to physically walk into most of our churches these days, would he pipe up and go, hey, why do you guys keep harping on all the stuff I set you free from, or all the stuff you're trying to get set free from? Why can't you focus on the goal, the reality of your current freedom? You're free indeed, definitely totally free right now. So let's figure out how to live within and enjoy that current freedom. I mean, that's why I set you free, was for freedom. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about what we're set free for, because I feel like a lot of us in this room, and I've been in your shoes, we could give a whole laundry list of stuff that Jesus has set us free from and that he still needs to set us free from, but we draw a blank when people ask us, what are you set free for? Meaning, now that we're not slaves, what are we? Who are we now? And that's why I'm such a fan of this Who You Say I Am song. All right, because the whole thing, it's one of the unfortunately few worship songs that focuses on our current freedom, focuses on who we are now as opposed to who we used to be. And here's who we are now. It's in the chorus of the song. I am a child of God. Yes, I am. I am a child of God. And in my Father's house, there's a place for me because I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. We are children of God, and that is at the heart of everything that Jesus did for us. Yes, he set us free from being hopelessly trapped in judgment and condemnation and guilt and shame in our false identities. He set us free from that, and we should always be thankful for it. We should always remember it. But the truth is this. The truth is that you and I will not be able to enjoy and experience the abundant life that Jesus said he died for if we neglect the awesome truth of what we've been set free for. What we've been set free to become, which is this: to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, to everyone who has put their faith in Jesus, he, Jesus, gave the right to become children of God. He walked into the master's house and said, these are free people now, and they're my brothers and sisters, they're your sons and daughters. He gave the right to become children of God, not born of natural descent or of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. So when we put our faith in Jesus, we are set free to become very literal sons and daughters of the living God. We were once strangers in the king's court, and now we're the king's kids. We are sons and daughters of the king. And if that's true, this has everything to do with our question of identity. I mean, as Christians, anytime we ask the question, who are we? Our immediate answer is supposed to be, because of Jesus, we are sons and daughters of the King. That's supposed to be our answer. And that's actually the only reason that God can welcome our mess into his presence, is because we're not strangers anymore. We're family now. Let me kind of explain that, all right? So one of my favorite authors and pastors is a guy named Timothy Keller. He's got a great church in New York City. He writes great books. You can pick up any book from a guy named Timothy Keller, and it'll be a good read. All right? But there's a sermon from him a few years back. I tried tracking it down. I can't find it. But there's a sermon I listened to a few years back that I'll never forget, and he's talking about what we're talking about today. Right? He talks about how understanding who God is as our King and our Father helps remind us of who we are. Right? Helps answer our question of identity. And Keller says this, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says this. He goes, how is it possible that God the King would put up with needy, broken, messy people like us? That's our question today, right? Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? And Keller says this. He goes, here's the truth. No one is allowed to disturb a king. No one. Meaning if some random peasant were to walk off the streets into the castle and interrupt one of the king's important meetings and say, hey, king, so I got some problems with my marriage. Do you have a minute? That rando would be laughed at and thrown out onto the streets, probably with his head not attached anymore, right? You can't do that. Keller says if God really is the king of existence, then you and I are right to initially believe that he can't be bothered by our mess. And then right when you start to get depressed, Keller follows by saying this. He goes, so yeah, you're right, no one. Right? No one can just waltz into the king's court, and no one can distract the king from all of his different important duties. No one can do that except for his kids. Because if God really is a perfect king and he's a perfect father, then he can rule his kingdom and raise his kids at the same time. And if we're truly sons and daughters of the king, like Jesus promised we are, then we can bring our mess into his presence. We can. And at that point, there's nothing too trivial that you could bother the king with. Right? As his sons and daughters, we could wake the king up at 4 a.m. and ask for a glass of water, and he won't send us packing. He'll just get out of bed and walk us to the kitchen. And that's only because we don't just call him king. We also get to call him dad. And our entire identity is supposed to be wrapped within that, wrapped within who Jesus set us free to become. Who are we? We are sons and daughters of the king. That is our identity. Now, outside of that sounding nice, and looking good on a screen and feeling like, oh, that's something I could tweet, or whatever. Aside from that, what is like the practical importance of understanding that we are sons and daughters of the King? How does knowing that help us to live within the reality of our current freedom, which is what Jesus died for? It's for freedom he set us free. And I think it's found in this. I think it's found in the truth that there is something uniquely powerful and lasting in the way that a father defines his children. That's just true. It's also for better or for worse, right? A father defines his children. Mothers do this too in a very powerful way, but there's something different about dads. A father has a unique power to define who his children are, for better or for worse. And all of us have some version of this story. Let's start with worse. All right, a lot of us have this story. After years of doing student ministry where I worked with middle school and high school students, I've seen this firsthand. And I've seen that a father doesn't even have to be present to define his children. In fact, a father says a lot by packing his bags and moving out of state before his kid is even born. I had those students, and their absent father had defined them without saying a word. I mean, those kids would literally describe themselves as abandoned and not enough and lonely. That's who they believed they were, and that's all they believed they would ever be. And then even now, as grown men and women, for those of us who had fathers who defined us poorly, I mean, we're still walking around enslaved by those false identities. We're trapped in them. Like our dads told us we were stupid. Right? And we don't cope with that by wallowing in our bedroom and listening to sad music anymore because we grew up. But we do work ourselves and our families into the dirt trying to prove dad wrong. Our dads told us we were weak. Right? We don't cope with that by shoving people around in the locker room anymore because we grew up. But we do still feel like we have to be the loudest, toughest, strongest person in every single setting. Our dads told us we were fat and we were ugly, and we still want to just be noticed when we walk into a room. We're still trying to prove dad wrong. For many of us, our fathers defined us for the worse, and whether we like it or not, they handed us our identities and we're slaves to them. And if we're not redefined somehow, then we'll be slaves to those false identities for the rest of our lives. All right, but then on the other side of the spectrum, some fathers are really conscious of and intentional about their power to define their kids, and so they do that for the better. All right, I was lucky enough to have a dad who, for the most part, did this really well with me. All right, I mean, whether it was through osmosis, just being around him, or he was outright speaking truth and like talking and defining me to my face. I left the house at 18 with a pretty firm understanding of what it means to be a footman. My last name's Foot, by the way. So we're not footmen in the sense that like we're all toe fungus doctors and very proud of it or something. But he did this really well with me, all right? He defined me and he taught me what it was like for us to act as men in the Foot family. And for those of us in the room who have a similar story, had a similar dad, you know that you develop, like you have a sense of pride in your family name and your family heritage, right? That's how it is for me at least. I'm proud to be a Foot. And all the things that my dad taught me, I hope to teach my son Micah, right? I want to teach him that on our very best days, footmen are hard workers, and we're willing to be humble and learn. We're loyal to our wives and our kids. We're unafraid of doing the right thing, even if it's going to get us hurt. And we also like to have a lot of fun, all right? We are strange, loyal men. And that's who we are. Those are pieces of my identity that were built into me at a very young age by my dad. And I'm thankful to him for that. But the truth is this, and none of us can escape it. For better or for worse, we were defined by our fathers because a father defines his children. And here's what I'm getting at. If Jesus really does give us the right to become sons and daughters of the living God, then we now also have the right to be defined only by our perfect Father. Him and him only. We are who he says we are. And that is the title of the song we're talking about today, Who You Say I Am. That's what the whole song is getting at. Who are we? We are sons and daughters of the King. What does that mean? It means this in the bridge of the song. I am chosen and not forsaken. Chosen, handpicked, welcomed. He knows you by name. He recognizes your voice. All of the things that good dads can do with their kids. I'm chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You're for me, not against me. That's grace, like we talked about 2 weeks ago. I am who you say I am. I am whoever my Father defines me to be. God, I am who you say I am. And when we sing this song, it's our way of talking to God, our perfect King and our perfect Father, and saying to him, please redefine me. I got a lot of bad definitions up here. Please redefine me. I want to live my life based out of who you say I am and not who my parents said I am, right? And not what my income or my ex or my body or my addictions and my wins and losses say I am. I want to be who you say I am. And as a perfect Father, God has a lot of great things to say about who we are. You can find his redefinition of who you are cover to cover in the Bible. It's also found all throughout the song. And this is our situation now, according to the song and according to the Bible. It's this. Jesus died so that we could be recreated and redefined. We are not who we used to be. We are now sons and daughters of the King, and we're now welcomed, loved, favored, forgiven, chosen, fought for, and set free by the God of existence. Back to our original question, who am I? If you've put your faith in Jesus, that is who you are now. Yeah, but well, growing up, my dad used to say, nope, God is your Father now, and this is what he says about you. This is our identity because we are who he says we are. Now let me wrap this thing up for us. Listen, the reason, like if you could walk out with one thing today, is this. The reason Jesus set us free is for freedom. It's not so we could go on an epic cosmic guilt trip with him for our pasts. And it's not so that we could be enslaved to those pasts. Jesus set you free so that you could live and act within freedom right now today. It's your reality. He set us free from judgment and from condemnation and from guilt and shame and all of our false identities. And he set us free to become literal sons and daughters of the King. The truth, though, is that most of us on a day-to-day basis do not feel like we're experiencing that freedom. So what is the key to experiencing that freedom? Here's what it's not. The key to experiencing that freedom is not to get free. You're already free. Free indeed, definitely totally free. Instead, the key to experiencing that freedom is to stop arguing with Jesus and just agree with and live within our new identities. Or again, as Jesus put it in this verse we keep coming back to, if you hold to my teaching, if you agree with and live within my words, my truth, then you're really my disciples, and then you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Listen, the unembraced truth of Jesus will not set you free. It is only the truth of Jesus that we agree with and confidently live within. That will set us free. And so here's what we should do. Hold on to that. Just agree with it and live within that reality. Like, don't argue with it right now. Instead, when you read those words on the screen, just confidently nod your head and say, God, thank you. Yes, I am. I am that now. And the reason we should do that is because there's something very good and very powerful about just agreeing with a good father's definition of who we are. And I want to tell you a story that I hope paints that picture for you. So one of my favorite things about being a dad right now, I got 3 kids, all right? So a daughter who's 5, a son who's 3, and then a new daughter who's 7 months old. All right, and one of my favorite things about my kids right now is that they don't disagree with me when I define them. They're too little to, right? They don't take it for granted. And so I'm trying to take advantage of this thing right now, right? I'm constantly looking for opportunities to define who they are. I'm telling Emery all the time, I go, hey, Em, you're beautiful. Right? You're so pretty and you're strong and you're good, and I love that you're my daughter, and I love being your dad. Trying to find chances to tell her that all the time. My son, Micah, same thing. Go, Micah, man, you are tough, and you're strong, and you're good, and I love that you're my son, and I love being your dad. I have to tell him that a lot lately, and I usually am telling him in situations in which he's objectively not being tough at all. Like a couple of days ago, I'm in the kitchen and I hear from the bathroom, it's Micah, and he's like, Dad, there's something scary in the bathroom, get in here, hurry. And it's hot outside, so all the spiders are coming inside to cool off. And I figured it was a bug. I walk up there, it's just a pine needle on the floor. It's like not even as long as a toothpick, it's just like not moving, a pine needle. But I take him, I'm like, hey, bud, it's just a needle, a pine needle, man, you just pick it up. You don't need to be scared of it, and you don't need to be scared of it because you're tough. Which is way different from walking in and go, dude, it's a pine needle, toughen up. Which is the first thought that goes through my head. All right? I'm not doing it perfectly, but I'm trying. I'm trying to seize every opportunity to tell my kids who they are. And that's because Allie, my wife, and I, we know that our kids are blank pages right now. We've talked about that in here before. Right, they're blank pages, and right now, Allie and I are the main authors. We get to write on their page. We get to define who they are. And one day, very soon, I know that other people will come in and write different untrue messages on my kids' pages. And they're going to get confused, and they're going to forget who they are. And I hope that they have the wisdom to pause and to go back and review what mom and dad said to be true about who they are. But for right now, my kids just agree with me when I define them. My favorite thing is this, with my daughter Emery specifically. Anytime I tell Emery, I go, hey, Em, you're so pretty, you're beautiful. Anytime I say that, she doesn't roll her eyes. She doesn't ignore it. She doesn't shrug and go, oh, thanks. And she doesn't even say anything other than this, all right? Every time I go, hey, Em, you're so pretty, 100% of the time, she always replies by saying, yes, I am. Every single time. And it's my favorite thing ever, right? And I love it because there's not an ounce of pride in her voice. She's not being cocky. She's just agreeing with me. Yes, I am pretty. It's like she hasn't even yet considered that she could be anything other than pretty. Pretty is just who she is, because catch this, because that's who Dad says she is. And Emery is agreeing with and living within the freedom of her father's definition. She's living within the reality of that identity and that identity alone. And it's good. It's pleasing to Emery. And it's so pleasing to me, her father. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pray, and then after that, we're going to sing this Who You Say I Am song together. And just like the last couple weeks, we're not going to dip out early. We're going to stay for 3 more minutes, and we're going to worship together. And we're going to worship God for who He is primarily, and then thankfully also for who He says that we are. And as we do that, I want you to pay special attention to what I think is the most powerful line in the whole song. It's just easy to overlook if we're not paying attention. It's the thing we sing over and over again in the chorus, which is this: who the Son sets free is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. And for the next 3 minutes at least, we're not going to argue with it or shrug it off or convince ourselves it's probably true for everyone else in the room but not for me. Instead, we are going to worship God by agreeing with his definition of who we are, because he says you're his son. And his shoulders go back, and he stands up straighter thinking about his sons. And he says that you're his daughter, and his shoulders go back, and he stands up straighter thinking about his daughters. And it's actually an act of worship. It's pleasing to Dad for us to stand up straight with our shoulders back and our heads held high and confidently sing, "Thank you. Yes, I am." And that's what we're going to do together right now. So pray with me. God, we're thankful for a lot of stuff today. We're specifically thankful for the fact that you sent your son Jesus here to die for us, to reconnect us back to you, to walk into the master's house and say, in your name I've set these people free, and in your name I've made them your sons and your daughters. God, that's like a very literal thing that you've done for us, and it's so easy for us to put it into the category of abstract. Right? That's just a metaphor. But I can't help but feel like that wounds you when we do that. Like if little M were to come up to me and go, "I'm not your daughter, that's just metaphor," it would break my heart. So God, we want to do what is pleasing to you. And in this incredible way that you always operate, the things that are pleasing to you are also so pleasing to us. So God, what I'm praying for today is take that out of the abstract realm and sink it into the reality of our hearts. Even if it's just for the next 3 minutes, that's enough for us to cruise on for a year. Help us to grasp the reality that you call me your son. You call us your sons. You call us your daughters. We're thankful for that. God, help us to live within that reality, because we have got baggage and we have got terrible definitions of who we are, and we are enslaved to them. We're trapped in that. And whenever we are enslaved in that, it's so easy to forget that we have a perfect King who is our perfect Father, and that's you. And that you're right there with us. You've chosen us and not forsaken us. And you're for us and you're not against us. And you look at us and you say, "These are my kids. And I'm very proud of my kids," and we thank you for that. God, we are humbled and honored to be a part of your family. We're humbled and honored to be called your sons and daughters. We thank you for that. And we're humbled and honored to call you Dad. And I pray this in the name of the person who made this possible for us, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me, and know his love for me. place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Sing it out. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. All right, Flatirons, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. It was so awesome to worship with all of you. If you need anybody to be praying with you, we have an awesome prayer team up front. We have offering buckets in the back. Don't forget to pick up a backpack list. We'll see you guys back here next week. We love you.